anger is good. And he kept saying that. Love is bad, anger is good. Compassion is bad, aversion is good, right? So I was like, okay, whatever. I just translated everything. And then he said, do you know why? I'm like, no. Well, the Buddha is bad because he destroys something. Love is good because it creates something. And all he was trying to say was like, when we use the word good, the Buddha destroys suffering. So we usually say something is bad if it destroys something, right? If it harms something, we say it's bad. In relation to harming something, we say it's bad. In relation to benefiting something, we say it's good. But it always depends what it is. Because love creates that which we want, which is happiness, we call it good. Right? It's not in and of itself good. Love is not in and of itself good. It is in relation to, for a rock, it's not good. What does a rock care? Right? Love is not good. A rock, let's assume a rock doesn't have a mind. I don't know, but I assume it doesn't have a mind. A rock couldn't care less about love or anger or whatever, right? So in relation to a human being, love is good because love, when we experience it, it benefits our happiness, which is what we want. Anger is in relation to us bad because it destroys that which we don't want, happiness. So it's always in relation to something, but not in and of itself. There's no absolute good. Absolute as in like in relation to nothing. So the Buddha is not absolute good because you can only say in relation to what? In relation to what? In relation to benefiting. But in relation to benefiting what? Happiness. Okay. But in relation to benefiting suffering, right? The Buddha doesn't benefit suffering. The Buddha harms suffering. Because he removes the teachings of the Buddha, basically. So the Buddha teaches something that potentially gets rid of suffering. So that's why there's no inherently good. There's no absolute good. Inherently kind of means independently of anything, not relative, like absolute good. But conventional, yes. There's conventional good, which is why there's no absolute long. If there were absolute long, this could not be short in relation to something else. It could either be long or short. It couldn't be both. So if it was inherently long, absolutely long, then you wouldn't need something shorter in relation to which it becomes long, and it couldn't be short. It would just be long. But it's both. It's both because it's in relation to something shorter, it's short. In relation to something longer, it's long. And so you can say the Buddha's both, good and bad. In relation to what? In relation to happiness, depending on, right? You can say he's bad because the Buddha destroys. I mean, yeah, it doesn't make the Buddha bad or whatever. It's just a relative phenomenon, good and bad, long and short, hot and cold. I mean, hot in relation to something that doesn't get heated. If you have something that does not get hot, it doesn't get heated up, like, right? Like, if in relation to something that cannot be heated up, there's no hot or cold. If the temperature of that object doesn't change, then a hot fire is not hot or not. In relation to this reaction of my skin, I can say fire is hot or not. And in the end, what I experience, it's a unique experience of heat. The fire doesn't have that. It's a coming together of different causes and conditions that I experience heat. A stone doesn't experience that. Right? Or like, let's say our perception of reality around us. I perceive blue. There is no blue out there. Physicists have proven that. There's no blue out there. There's just light waves. Depending on the length of the light wave, and depending on the coming together of our retina and parts of the brain, etc., I have a unique experience of blue. It's only in relation to a certain light wave, it's in relation to a part of the brain, etc. In relation to that, I perceive blue. There's no absolute blue. But it seems the blue is out there and I just see it. What's inherently blue, I perceive that. There's nothing inside the object that's blue. It's because of causes and conditions, I perceive it that way. right? In relation to my eyes, in relation to light waves, there's blue, but there's no absolute blue. So good and bad are just conventionally such, or relatively, in relation to something else. For instance, if you're a mother, there's nothing inherent in you that makes you a mother. It is in relation to a child that you can be called a mother. So there's no inherent motherness. It's in relation to a child that you're a mother. In relation to the fact you have parents, in relation to something other, you're a child, your daughter or son. Not a child, but a daughter or son. In relation to your passport, you're Israeli. There's nothing Israeli inside you. In relation to who your mother was, you're Jewish. In relation to... and it's all made up of thoughts. I mean, actually, being Jewish or not, I mean, it's like how we define, or how a certain group of people defines being Jewish. If your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. In Christianity, your mother's Jewish or not, who cares? You need to be baptized. Right? So it's again, how you define it. There's nothing inherent in you, right? It's just a matter of definition. So in relation to this, I call someone Jewish. In relation to something else, I call someone Christian. In relation to this, that, or the other, I call them Buddhist, whatever. So there's nothing inherent in the object. Does that make sense? No? Is this in and of itself long?
I think it's thought construction.
It's thought construction. That's exactly what the Buddha says. Everything is this, that, and the other because of thoughts. If you didn't have a thought, if there were no thought, nothing would be there. That's pretty extreme. But that's really what the Buddha says. If you didn't have thoughts, how could you have a table if there was no thought? Someone needs to say table. Otherwise you wouldn't have a table. You wouldn't have a surface of a table without, you wouldn't have an atom without someone thinking. Now I know your mind is going, but there must be something. Right? There must be something. It cannot just be thought.
But there is.
What is there?
Maybe things like we cannot describe it, but it's there.
You cannot describe it, but it's there. So what is it? It kind of makes sense, because otherwise, like I said to you previously, when I say there's no extreme smell, there's only a conventional, like when I said there's no smell, there's just a normal smell, and you have a sense there can't be anything. So you're saying there must be something there. The Buddhists say the only thing that is there is labeling. Like there's interdependence, but even that doesn't exist absolutely. That is also dependent on thought. So that's, sorry, I tossed you right into the most difficult idea. I tossed you right into it. It's like you're trying to learn to swim. I took you and threw you in the swimming pool. But let's go gently. Let's go gently before we have lots of debates and lots of questions. Of course, you're going to have thousands of questions, but I'm not going to answer those questions now. I'm going to explain it gently. Okay? I threw you in there, now I'm taking you out again. Okay, so, all right. Now, here we're talking about the relativity. So let's just stay with me. Long and short is easy. Here and there, we're very much aware of the relativity. But the relativity with regard to other things is a little harder. Big, small, especially when you have opposites, then it's easy. Like light, dark, hot, cold, etc. So that's pretty easy. But like being a woman, for instance, it's in relation to certain body parts. We say someone is a woman, or maybe, well, no, actually that's no longer okay. It's the way you feel, right? You may be raised a woman, you may be born a woman, but you may feel like, I'm a man. I feel I'm a man, and you have a sex change. And nowadays people have come to the conclusion, yeah, this is, if you feel like, then if you feel that way. So it's in relation to how you feel you're a man or woman, right? I mean, I don't know, who's to determine? It's in relation to this, that, and the other. So therefore, it's always in relation to something else that we call something such and such. If it were inherently this, if it was inherently a long stick, we wouldn't have to refer to something else to explain why it's long. If it was absolutely long, you wouldn't have have to bring a matchstick to say, yeah, but in relation to this, it's long. It would just be, and we would all recognize it as such. No, but. Sorry. No, I'm kidding. There'll be a chance for a but. But let me just first explain this, because you have a very natural reaction, right? And I know the but because I threw you in there. So of course it's important to first allow me to go step by step, and I'm afraid your but will still be there even tomorrow evening. Because it's so hard to understand. But if you just get bits and pieces of it, that's already like you're laying already some foundation. Now allow me to move away from relativity. So I think a relativity makes sense to a degree, doesn't it? When I say it's always in relation to something other than itself, then I can say I'm a human, I'm a woman, I'm this, that, and the other. Right? Sometimes it's totally unrelated things like hot and cold, opposite things. Sometimes it's parts of me, in relation to parts of me, in relation to my history, in relation to my passport. I can say I'm this, that, and the other. But let's take it to the 3 types of dependent arising. 3 types of dependence. Very important, very important. Now, when you hear this, you may go, how does that explain anything? But bear with me. We say that nothing exists absolutely in and of itself, because things are dependent in 3 ways. Dependent on causes and conditions, dependent on parts, and dependent on thought, on labeling, which is just another way of saying dependent on thought. Because our thoughts label, designate. So first, dependence on causes and conditions. How does that help? Well, even though it seems that something is inherently good, intrinsically good, or intrinsically a seed or a sprout or whatever, it seems that way, but if it were intrinsically this, then it wouldn't depend on anything. If it was inborn, if it was like in that thing, like it would just be that without depending on something else, then it wouldn't need causes and conditions. Now, what's a little difficult is we do say things are intrinsic in certain objects, okay? This is an example one of my teachers, again the same teacher, he used, and it's very potent, but I'm not sure it's too early mentioning it, but I still think it's pretty comprehensive, and you can understand it. So he says, usually we wouldn't say, so this is hot coffee. Well, used to be, but let's assume this is hot coffee. Is coffee in the nature of being hot?
No.
No, it's not in the nature of coffee to be hot. Why not?
You have also cold coffee.
You have cold coffee, and the fact that it's hot depends on other things other than the coffee. It depends on other things other than the coffee to make it hot. So it cannot be in the nature of the coffee to be hot. Is fire in the nature of being hot?
Yes.
Well, but it needs other things to be hot. So therefore, in Buddhism, we only talk of a conventional nature. We say, conventionally, yes, it's innate in the fire. And it's conventionally not innate in the water to be hot. Because water needs other factors. It can also be cold. But in the same way, we talk about independence, right? We say Israel is an independent country. It is. But is it totally independent? No. It is in relation to certain political situations that we can call it independent. It's not absolutely independent, like totally independent. Okay? So therefore, total independence is impossible. That something is totally in the nature of the object means that it doesn't depend on something else to be in that nature. Does that make sense? So when we say intrinsic, if it was intrinsically a table, it wouldn't depend on anything. It would just be a table. It would not depend on causes and conditions to be a table. It wouldn't depend on parts to be a table. And it wouldn't depend on someone thinking, this is a table. It just would be, in and of itself. Right? So that's why we use the the word intrinsic. It's the nature. So conventionally we can say, yeah, fire is always hot. We don't call something that is cold fire, or we call something that is water, cold water, hot water, it's still water. So that's why we say it's in the nature of water to be hot. But that's just conventionally. Because really to be in the nature means it just is. It just is. It doesn't need anything to be. It just is, right? If something is in the nature, so fire actually, it's not intrinsic in the fire to be hot. It's not its nature as such, because it depends on other things to be hot. So to be in the nature just means it is. When we use the word, that's why we borrow this word from the English language, or in Tibetan, we use it in Tibetan. When we say a child is, it's in the nature of this child to be naughty. What we mean is no one made this child naughty, the child was already like that. Of course that's impossible. Actually from a Buddhist point of view, no. There must have been causes and conditions that were responsible for that child to be naughty. But the way we use it, we use the word as if it was independent of anything, it just is naughty. So we borrow that word from the English language to describe this extreme, saying there is nothing that is in and of itself without depending on something else, good, bad, a table, or anything else. Because whatever exists, it must depend on causes and conditions. It must depend on parts other than itself, and it must depend on a mind, on thought to perceive it. So there's nothing that exists by way of its own nature, that is naturally that, such that it just is and it doesn't need anything to be that. But that's how we perceive things. This is how we, and it's very hard to recognize that, but this is how we perceive things to exist. As if, for instance, I walk into this room, I see a clock. Like, it's almost saying, recognize me as a clock, I am a clock. We don't remember the time when we could not recognize that as a clock. We needed to call it a clock. We needed to be explained the functions. We couldn't see it as such. Now since we see it, it seems to be that in and of itself. Like with the disciplinarian. There's no disciplinarian youth in him. It depended on other people, right? Calling him such, etc. And then we can say he's a disciplinarian. But it seems like it's his nature to be a disciplinarian. That's how it appears. So you can see how this idea of being dependent on other things denies the possibility of it being naturally this, just in and of itself. Right? Being its nature, and it's got nothing to do with anything else. Okay? So that's why the three types of dependence are explained. And they're not that hard. Dependence on causes and conditions. Phenomena are dependent on many causes to be what they are. Okay? And when we're angry with someone, we're very good at ignoring these causes. We just see them as naturally bad. Right? Have you ever noticed? Have you ever heard about like a serial killer? This evil person, horrible. You hate this person, possibly. Right? Just evil, that should be destroyed. You have all this strong aversion. And then you hear their story. And you realize, wow, the perpetrator is also a victim. This and this happened to the person. That, let's say you hear that their mother had been killed in front of them, and they've been brought up, like raised in an environment where they saw people killed all the time. And suddenly you realize where it comes from. You realize, oh, it was all these causes and conditions, and your heart melts. You understand? It's like, wow, if I were in that situation, I would be like that. Usually we don't have a self of our self-being. When we have negative qualities, we blame our parents. It's not us. I'm not really like that. I wasn't born like that. There's always a sense other people are like that. They're kind of naturally evil. Kind of like, this is how it feels. If I don't like another person, I don't know anything about them, I feel like, oh, they're really bad. But I am, no, that's my parents. But no, there are causes for that. It's not me, I was born without those. So we have much more of a sense like, yeah, it's not my nature. My nature is good. Other people's nature is bad. Have you ever noticed how we have that discrepancy? I keep jokingly say that, but I think it's quite serious. We've taken Freud to an extreme. We have taken it to an extreme. I mean, looking for the causes of our problems is fine, but seeing them in our parents, wow, it does not help our relationship with our parents. It's terrible. I think we've taken it to an extreme. Anyway, that's a whole different matter. But it's just what we do. We're good at extremes. So this is the generation when we blame our parents for everything. Come on, it was more than our parents. The whole country educated us. And we also brought our own likes and dislikes and genetic material and so forth, and our parents definitely didn't pick and choose. Well, maybe one day they will be able to pick and choose the material, the genetic material, but they haven't done that so far, have not been able to do so far. So many causes and conditions created us, created who we are, and created other people. So understanding that there's nothing intrinsically like that, all sorts of causes and conditions. Right? And I affect you, you affect me, we affect each other as causes and conditions. And so who am I going to blame? Pride is another really good example. When we're arrogant and proud. Pride can be a good kind of pride, but here I'm talking about the bad kind of, like feeling superior to others, feeling like better than others, right? So this pride, actually, I feel like I'm responsible for all these good qualities. I should be proud of my parents. They were the first who taught me all the basics in terms of, I couldn't speak now, right? Any kind of quality in terms of verbal qualities that connect to my verbal abilities, those were my parents initially. My motoric kind of abilities initially, we're motoric, we are able to, so from a motorical point of view, that we're able to move in a certain way, we can eat in a certain way. So basically, all this is also due to the kindness of our parents. Of course our parents make mistakes. I'm not being extreme here. I'm not saying that just as I have mistakes, our parents make mistakes, and sometimes it's the upbringing, where they come from, and so they just can't help it. But the problem is the frustration, the hatred, the frustration towards our parents, which really harms us. That's the problem. And so it comes out of an extreme sense that my parents have made all these mistakes. So going back to arrogance, actually I should also be proud of my parents, because they laid the foundation. And I should be proud of my teachers. And I should be proud of my classmates. And I should be proud of the people who fed my teachers and my parents and my classmates. So many people were involved in giving me an education, which now may count for me having certain qualities. But I'm only proud, I'm arrogant about these qualities as if they were part of me, like no causes and conditions. I should be proud of everyone, right? If I'm proud of my achievements, I should be proud of everyone else who's been involved in it. But our arrogance doesn't do it. It zooms into one aspect and ignores the rest. So anger is the same. It zooms in one negativity. This person is really evil and doesn't see all these causes and conditions that gave rise to that person. So therefore, it's again this extreme focusing in on something and just blowing up what's there and not seeing the whole picture. I mean, with medicine, it's the same thing. Holistic medicine, just dealing with one aspect, just not enough, because everything is interrelated. So the Dalai Lama talks about it, dependence on causes and conditions. He mentions he gives different examples. So, for instance, he uses medicine. So a holistic approach is helpful, taking into consideration an interactive system, not just one cause. In terms of diet, the whole superfood thing. We'd like a quick fix. Oh my God, enough of this stuff, I'll be healthy. But so many causes and conditions are needed to be healthy. Healthy mind is also important. Exercising, diet, etc. Again, before also with our sense perception, we believe the cause for me perceiving an object is the color blue over there, just one cause. But many causes and conditions that allow me to see blue. So therefore there's no objective intrinsic blue, because there are many causes and conditions as a result of which I perceive blue. If blue were intrinsic, in the object, everyone would have to perceive it the same way. Right? It would not depend on anyone perceiving it, it just would be, and everyone should see it. But because there's nothing objective there, lots of causes and conditions are needed for that to take place. Makes sense, doesn't it? Alright. So, therefore, what did I say? Arrogance. Craving. Again, I crave for one person. But again, so many causes and conditions that made that person great. But I don't crave their parents. Just crave the result. So this is on a coarser level, But even if you take a subtler level, think of a subtler level. So when a cause turns into its result, I like to use the example of a seed turning into a sprout. When the seed becomes a sprout, right? So we have lots of examples like seeds growing into plants, fire turning into smoke or giving rise to smoke. There's so many examples. But again, the thing that like we feel it's very clearly defined, cause, effect, etc. But when you look at, for instance, a seed giving rise to a sprout, when is the exact moment the seed becomes the sprout? Can you define the exact moment? In fact, we would all disagree on when is it called a sprout. Often I give this example. If I take many photographs of that process of seed growing into sprout, and I ask you to choose the moment when the seed is no longer a seed and the sprout is now, or this object is now a sprout, we would all disagree. Because in the end, it's thought. It's like what we define to be a seed, what we define to be a sprout. So there is an object, there's a basis, and based on that we call it a seed, we call it a sprout. So even this dependence on causes and conditions, if we go a little deeper, there is no object in and of itself a cause or in and of itself a result. In the end, it depends on thought. Okay? But nonetheless, it does depend conventionally on causes and conditions. Phenomena, if we don't look deeper, if we don't look closer, the way I just did with the seed and the sprout, if I just sit back, we say yes. So there are causes and conditions that give rise to an object. And we are the result of so many causes and conditions. So many causes and conditions that turned us into who we are. So there's not a single kind of independent entity of which we perceive. Couldn't be, because we're dependent on so many causes and conditions. But we're also dependent on so many parts that are not ourselves. I mean, there are different body parts, different types of mind. So what is that solid I? There are different types of awareness, different body parts, right? And the same is true for anything. A table. A table is dependent on so many parts, each atom. So where's the table within those parts? Is there like some table in there? It seems like with the flower, especially this is a very pretty flower, like a bouquet or whatever you call that. So this kind of flower, it seems like this one here, the pink one here, or the one that you can see, the purple one here. So this type of flower, it seems like, oh, it's this beautiful object that has flower petals and it has a stem, right? And it holds this beauty. Well, it's just parts assembled in a certain way. Where's the actual flower? Is there like an owner, the flower, that holds all these parts? It seems like that, right? It seems to be this beautiful flower that holds petals, it holds a stem, it holds leaves, it has the color purple. But where's that flower? Can you remove those parts and still have the flower? Right? If there were such a flower that owns all these beautiful parts, we could pick off each of these and we'd be left with the flower. Well, try that. Try that, but don't hope to have a flower afterwards once you've tried that. Right? It's the same with the person. Oh, there seems to be the solid person. But remove the sense perception, remove the mental consciousness, remove the body. What self is there left? What self is there left? So actually, there can't be some intrinsic I because it's dependent on parts. And if I remove the parts, the self is gone. Right? But it's not the same. It's not different. So where's that I, that separate self that I perceive? We're not denying the conventional I, but that's not the one we're perceiving, so no problem. That's not the one we're attached to.